three of us will often say, my yoga is this. You know, maybe my yoga today is shutting up. Maybe my yoga today is being active. Today, my yoga is coming on here with my two dearest friends and playing in the sandbox of the sutras.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sutra Squad podcast. My name is Seth Barron. The podcast is brought to you by One Deep Breath, and I am with my superstar Sutra Squad, Sarah Page.
Good morning.
And Sally Moore.
Morning.
And Sally, the reason I was laughing is Sally just asked, the t-shirt says, just like my country, I'm scrappy and hungry. Because when I saw Hamilton for the first time, I couldn't resist the swag. It was just too good. Because the show was just bananas. I saw it. I bought the tickets right when I started hearing about right when it transferred to Broadway from the public, and it was like months out. And I got like a Wednesday matinee was the only day I could get tickets. And my boss, I remember giving me a little bit of grief, telling him I was like leaving work to go to a show. And he's like, what are you going to go see? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's this like multiracial rap version of the story of Alexander Hamilton. And he was like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And I said, just you wait. Right?
So you saw the original?
Wait.
You saw the original?
I saw Lin-Manuel. I saw the whole original Broadway cast. I get chills thinking about it. And my sister was within a week of her due date, and I literally remember saying to her, cross your legs, you cannot give birth until I see the show. Like, I cannot miss these tickets.
And welcome to the Sutra Podcast.
Hey, welcome to the Sutra Squad Podcast. Here we are. What is one word that describes where and how you feel right now?
I'm going with proud.
Proud. Love that. How about you, Sarah Page?
I got very moved by your t-shirt, so I feel scrappy.
Scrappy.
I'm feeling scrappy.
Yeah, we scrappy out in here.
I'm scrappy.
I just really feel joy that we get to do this, and that we choose to do this, and that we take joy in it. And like, you know, while we hope there's a gazillion of you out there listening, like if we reach 5 people, I'm happy. It's not that it's for us, but that it's for the world. It's for the benefit. Like this is part of our seva. For the seva means service in Sanskrit, to be the change. Like this is our way, one of the ways of being the change we want to see in the world. And I just couldn't feel more joyous about spending my time, attention, and energy to do that.
It's a lovely sandbox.
It is. So it's especially lovely. I mean, it's lovely every day, and it's especially lovely today because we're really looking at a verse that is so central to really everything we're going to talk about, because we're looking at Sutra 1.2. So last week we talked about the beginning of the beginning of the beginning in the Yoga Sutra, Atta Yoga Anushasanam. Now this is yoga. The sense that yoga is this fierce, urgent call to the present moment. And our experience of now is eternal and ephemeral. The time is now. It's always now. That was then. This is now. It's now. And just like in meditation practice, how like when we've dropped in and then you think to yourself, ooh, I'm meditating so good right now. You're out. And that sense of now is both like urgent and fleeting. And so we have to wrestle with that, but there's this essential truth that yoga and the practice of yoga always calls us back to the present moment. And then this week we're looking at Yoga Sutra 1.2, which is how Master Patañjali gives what you could say is maybe the most like essential, the simplest definition of yoga. And we're going to look at these again. It's a 4 words that we're going to take a look at and talk about like what it means to live them. So to begin, I'm going to chant these words in Sanskrit. The sutra is Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And those 4 words, Yoga, Chitta, Vritti, Nirodha, when chanted together, there's a little bit of a change in the pronunciation because of some grammar in Sanskrit to make the sound more connected and beautiful. Because if you were to say Yoga Chitta, you can hear like the air stops, right? Yoga chitta. You have to have a glottal at the end of the A. Whereas the sandhi, the grammar, says that when you put those two words together in that sequence, the correct pronunciation to the best of my knowledge, is that there's a softening at the end of yoga into the next. So it's yoga chitta vritti nirodha. And you can hear that like it creates some connection. Yoga. So if you'd like, if it is safe for you to do so, wherever you are out there, dear listeners, maybe take a moment and just notice how you're sitting and sit up tall. Notice how you've arrived in this moment, and there's nothing right or wrong about it. It just is how you've arrived in this moment. And if you want to join me for one vibration of Om, if you like, you can bring your hands together at your heart center, Anjali Mudra. And you can join me. Take a deep breath in. Let it go. For Om, breathe in. Chanting Yoga Sutra 1.2. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So yoga. We talked about this word last week. Yoga, to yoke, to join, to connect, to bring together. This practice that we're doing, it is both the practice and the state of the practice. It is both the practice and the goal or attainment of the practice. All of that is yoga. Chitta is, in the American Sanskrit workbook, defined the field of consciousness or the perceived. In some translations, it's referred to as mind stuff. It is the content of your mind, is chitta. And chitta is prakriti. It is so in the Sankhya yogic philosophical system, there is like the material energy and then there's spiritual energy. The material energy is prakriti, right? All of this stuff that we see, perceive in the material realm. And then purusa, which is the spiritual energy, the soul, the atman, the paramatma, all of which we'll eventually tackle on being a little high leveling. But the reason I share that is because I think it's just always important to remember that the chitta is prakriti, right? Like your thoughts are real. It doesn't make them true, or it doesn't make them the truth, but it makes them real. There is a truth to the thought. It's a real thing. And sometimes I think we discount our thoughts or we dismiss our own thoughts. And acknowledging that our thoughts are of this material realm and that there is a truth and that there is a reality to the thoughts is useful, I think, in order for us to work with them, as opposed to rejecting, fighting, denying, or repressing, which is different than restraint. So vritti is swirl. Vritti is like rotate. Vritti, it sort of sounds like, I think of it like, if you ever see a river or a stream, off on the sides often, depending on the geographic, particulars, but you might see like a little eddy, right? That when the water's flowing fast off on the sides, it'll like spin out into itself and it sucks down, right? That's like vritti. That's how I think of vritti. It's that like, it's like spins on itself. And by the way, for Sanskrit, for yoga teachers out there, vritti is the same root as the words used to describe a revolved pose. Parivrita trikonasana, right? like to describe a pose in revolution, like Parshva Konasana, side angle. And then like some people teach like the standing lunge twist is actually Parivrita Parshva Konasana, revolved side angle. So that's the vritti, you hear that root, the vrit. And then the last word is nirodha. So this is a big one. Arresting, ceasing to identify with, restraint is another word for it. And it is to restrict, to confine, to restrain, to control, suppress. And so the translation, like in its full, is yoga. This is now, let's start from the American Sanskrit Workbook, which is a little bit technical. Yoga is the nirodha of, by ceasing to identify with vritti, the active state of chitta, the field. A more straightforward definition of these terms from Swami Satchidananda, from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali: the restraint of the modifications of the mind stuff is yoga. And the Jivamukti translation by Sharon Gannon and Manorma: when you stop identifying with your thoughts, fluctuations of mind, then there is yoga, identity with self, capital S, which is samadhi, happiness, bliss, and ecstasy. That's a little more poetic and interpretive translation. And then I'm going to quote a little bit from Inside Patanjali's Words by Master Reverend Jagannath Correa, which is this really beautiful text because he, as a real modern Sanskrit scholar and master, also like pulls some of these words apart into their root terms from the Sanskrit that can really, I think, illuminate a depth of meaning. So he talks about nirodha, and ni, leading or guiding down into inward, back within. So think about niyama, right? Yamas are the external practices, the niyamas in the internal practice. And we'll talk about this because it shows up really importantly in the term pranidhanana. When we talk about surrender to the divine, that word pranidhana, pra before, ni within, and so remember that for later. Rodha, sprouting, growing, moving upwards, ascending. From rudha, desiring, covering, obstruct, arrest, avert. Now, as he says, from these roots, we can discern a translation of this word, which can read something like, to lead or guide within, in order to grow and ascend to the spiritual heights. So this idea of nirodha is not like repression. It's more like an intentional restraint, as in like placing attention with intention. And this is from a little paragraph that I thought was really insightful from Jagannath Correa. In its final manifestation, nirodha is a state in which the mind has become utterly clear, steady, one-pointed, and free from selfish attachment. It is a state of mind that brings about yoga, union, harmony, and integration of all aspects of the individual and of the individual with nature. It is kaivalya, liberation from suffering brought by ignorance. Sally and Sarah Page, are there definitions of this verse that have particular meaning to you, since there's so many ways to interpret these fascinating, simple, and incredibly deep words?
Well, I have two because I wanted to make them into one, but I didn't feel like that was within the rules. So I'm going to give these two, but I like the idea of tying them together. So the first one is from The Secret Power of Yoga by Nishala Joy Devi. And it says, yoga is the uniting of consciousness in the heart. And I really love that. And
say it again.
So yoga is the uniting of consciousness in the heart. So I'm going to give that part one. And then part two is from Unravel the Thread by Ruben Vasquez. Regulating ways of being, which is a more common translation that I see, but together,
okay. Yeah,
I love them.
Regulating ways of being and that sense of heart connection is like, yeah, there's, I see what you mean. Like
the uniting, regulating ways of being and uniting them in the heart. So when I write a sutra book, I'm going to do something.
There you go. There you go. How about you, Sarah Page? I know you got a stack of books there.
I got a stack of books.
What's a translation of the definition of yoga that calls to your heart?
Well, actually, all of them. You touched on one. I always tend to go old school, really, with the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. He's just very simple by Satchidananda. The restraint of the modifications of the mind stuff. But what he says, I really love this in his explanation. He says, in this sutra, Patanjali gives the goal of yoga. So simple. This is the goal of yoga. We have all these books. I have 5 books at the ready. The goal of yoga is to calm the mind. He says, for the keen student, or for a keen student, this one sutra would be enough because the rest of them only explain this one. You know, it goes back to my favorite sutra, which is Ishvara, surrender. You can do all of this work. You can read all the books. You can do all the work, or you can just surrender. And basically, all of yoga, everything you're about to do, is in this sutra.
Yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. It's essential, fascinating. So, a lot of ways to interpret these words, and I think it then asks us to how we address that in the real world. So all 3 of us give asana classes. We teach, we consider ourselves yoga teachers. And there's that moment when a new student comes to your class and they say, okay, I know I'm here. I know what I just did, but what is yoga? So Sarah Page, what is yoga?
Okay. This is enough. It is the restraint of the modification of the mind stuff. That is yoga.
Yeah, is that what you say to a student?
Actually, it's very interesting. I had this conversation. I said, what is yoga in class? Because what is yoga? And I said, technically yoga is community, yuj, one, coming together. Technically. That's what I normally say. But then I'm like, it's so multi-layered. I don't give just one answer. Sort of like, what is it to you in this moment today? We often say, 3 of us will often say, my yoga is this. Maybe my yoga today is shutting up. Maybe my yoga today is being active. Maybe my yoga today is seva or service. Today my yoga is coming on here with my 2 dearest friends and playing in the sandbox of the sutras. That's my yoga.
What about you, Sally? New student comes in and then after classes, that was amazing. What just happened? What is yoga? What does it mean?
So I say something like, yoga is life and life is yoga. And yoga teaches us to wake up and engage in every moment. It's the practice of separating story from fact. And I love it's courage and surrender. It's for everyone and anyone, and it's never punitive.
Sally, you just said something that really rocked my world. Thank you. You said it's courage and surrender, something that and it is. Yogis were not seen back in the day as enlightened and good people. Many yogis were seen as dangerous because it is courage, it is surrender.
Well, and I think one other thing, sometimes if I use an example from my life, I grew up with being shy. I am shy. And I think until second grade, my second grade report card said, light bulb, Sally asked the student, maybe if it wasn't a problem, if it wasn't too much of a problem, maybe when you're done with the scissors, could I maybe borrow them for just a second? That was like a massive win. And I thought, without yoga,
I just had like so much tenderness for sweet little childhood
for that
Sally,
little sweet
Baby
girl
Sally.
who it took so much courage and surrender to ask to please, maybe if it wasn't a problem, possibly could you maybe let me use those scissors just for a second when you're completely done and have zero use for them whatsoever. But what I think, I use this example because I lived so much of my life with I am shy, and I'm not shy. I am what I consider myself as an introverted extrovert. Like, it takes some energy to be around people a lot. But if I wouldn't been able to recognize that story, internal dialogue, I would not be able to show up externally on this podcast behind a microphone or be a yoga teacher so much, you know?
It's so beautiful. And I think, well, first of all, like, I give a similar answer. You know, I say, like, you know, yoga is connection. It is oneness, and it is both the practice and the objective or the outcome of the practice. And I also will invite a new student into and say, like, you know, what we do here in the studio is very much, you know, of course it's yoga, and it is yoga asana. It's a physical practice that is the tip of the iceberg of yoga. It is the beginning of yoga. It is not yoga in like if all you're going to do is move your body into these shapes, while that's a great thing to do, it's only one piece of the practice. Because, you know, and I give the example that, of the 195, 196, depending on the translation, verses of the Yoga Sutra, the number of verses, of lines that are about asana, the physical practice. Asana in Sanskrit means seat. It also means pose. And if you ever hear Sanskrit poses spoken by a yoga instructor, with one or two exceptions, they end in that asana, Tadasana, mountain. Urdhvastasana, extended mountain. Uttanasana, right? Forward fold. Anyway, it's only one of the 8 limbs of yoga. And of those 195, 196 verses, how many are about asana?
3.
It's 3.
Why did I think it was 5?
It's 3. It's 3. So, something's going on here that's bigger than just this, how I'm moving this physical body. And Master Patanjali illuminates that in this context of yoga chitta vritti nirodha, that like the actual state of yoga is when that swirl of our mind is brought to stillness, is restrained. And again, it's not repressed, it's not denied. And Sally said something so important, that yoga is not punitive, and yoga is not possible until we actually separate the story from the object, or at least start to feel for where there is space between those two. And so what we mean by that, the story is what you tell yourself about the object. In Buddhism, this is referred to like sometimes as like dependent arising, like as in like, and it's the interconnectedness that's connected to this concept of emptiness, shunyata, in Buddhist philosophy, that like everything is fundamentally empty until we impose upon it, right? Like this is just like, I don't know, this is tree pulp that's been mashed up, reconstituted, and then some ink that was put onto these pages. The pages were bound, or it's the doorway to timeless spiritual wisdom and a path away from suffering and towards spiritual truth. All those things are true, and they're all just story that I tell. I think to understand this idea of living yoga, of like and the definition of this, and it's really big in a bigger, richer way, is to really remember and understand that like you cannot restrain what we do not acknowledge, or that we will not be with, and that we will not see. And I know from my own experience of my chitta vritti, the story I tell myself about myself, that when Mean Seth is telling the story, when my saboteur is speaking up, and whatever you call that voice, we all have that voice of the inner critic, whatever you, again, by any name or it's there for pretty much all of us. I've tried for a long time. I tried to just ignore it. And then I tried to I went through this period of really feeling like a failure in my practice because I couldn't stop it. And I think when I first encountered this definition of yoga, I thought that like my work is to like destroy that voice, to like somehow, if I just grounded it out harder on the mat, I could just make it go away. 10 years of deep practice later, that has not been what has happened. I'm sad to report that, you know, like no matter how many handstand hops, no matter how much sweat, no matter how much time on the mat, he's still there. And so like denying it, repressing it, changing it just hasn't worked. And about a year ago, I was in a coaching session, and we stumbled onto this turn of phrase that has really sat with me so powerfully ever since, which is to invite the wisdom of my inner critic to support me. And here's how that connects to this idea of nirodha. One is that like it's an acknowledgement that there is wisdom in the inner critic. It's there, like it didn't come from nothing. It's a dependent arising phenomenon. Its antecedent isn't always actually that important, even though we like to try to spend a lot of time on it. And what would it look like to acknowledge it and consider that there could be something underneath it or something I could derive from it that is useful and supportive? And so in this idea of like yoga chitta vritti nirodha, there's this sense that the restraint or is it that ceasing to identify with, that space between the story and the object, is what allows for the thought to start to still or slow down or quiet down. And like we're easily activated, especially in this cultural moment that we're living in, which is one in which we are being activated, I would argue intentionally in many circumstances and contexts. And we could go into the whole science of polyvagal theory of like sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system activation, like, you know, in that activated state, in the chitta vritti, like you're actually incapable of higher level reasoning because your prefrontal cortex is literally offline. Right? It's it's why we like, you talk like in the neurological context, it's like the sympathetic nervous system is like, you know, in the back brain, in the reptilian brain, it's the survival instinct. And it's not until we can actually like, you know, re-regulate that we can come back into higher level thinking. So it's the same, like in the chitta vritti, you're just in the swirl. You're in the swirl. The nirodha, I think of it as almost like stepping into the eye of the storm. I can't get out of, like, no matter how hard I've tried, I have not been able to stop the storm. I have not been able to stop the cyclone of thoughts. I have not been able to make them go away. So you got to go through and in, to mix metaphor a little bit, right? You got to go through and in, which is to say like, okay, there's that thought. Ooh, fat, stupid, lazy. That's like my favorite Mean Seth narrative to myself. okay, there's fat, stupid, lazy again, but like what's a loving choice I can make for myself? Well, okay, wait a minute though, Seth, like that has partially been what's motivated me to like be committed to my physical asana practice, which is very useful, meaningful, and it is good for me. It's good for me to get on a yoga mat. So, okay, thank you. Thank you for kicking the ass. I was dragging my butt to think about whether or not I was going to go to the studio today. So thank you for a motivation to get me to the studio. Because that is aligned to my higher meaning and intention. So thank you. There's wisdom there. As opposed to like, I'm not fat, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that. That's just feeding itself. Acknowledging like, oh yeah, I do actually want to go to the studio. Not saying it very nicely to myself, but there is value or there is something there to take. And so that's like the nirodha.
You know, listening to you talk, I'm just thinking, because what I think of a lot is filtering things through my heart is like a way the heart tends to be. And when you were talking about like the mean voice in my head, like I was like, wow, what would happen if I gave it a space in my heart? Like, what if it needed a hug? You know what I mean? Like, noticing it and not saying, great, let's take over this way, but like how much energy have I tried to keep it out of my heart? But maybe, just maybe, like you said, if I can say, I'm going to welcome you in, do you need a hug?
No, it's a beautiful thought.
I love this, listening to you talk too, Seth, and about the stories, right? And I'm looking through all of the translations that I have in front of me. And, you know, as different as they are all the same, obviously. But this one, I love what, again, Satchitananda, the Yoga Sutras, he says, as the mind, so the person. Bondage. Right?
Whoa, pause. As the mind.
So the person. And he goes on.
So the person.
Bondage or liberation are all in your mind. So if you feel bound, you are bound. If you feel liberated, you are liberated. Things outside neither bind nor liberate you. Only your attitude towards them does that. It's like, you know, goes on and he says, this is why whenever I speak to the prison inmates, I say, you all feel imprisoned and anxiously wait to get outside these walls. But look at the guards. Are they not like you? They're human. You know, they are also within the same walls. It's really interesting, you know. So what you think, there you are.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, we all, and the thoughts, like, and we all construct our own realities. So there's something, I think, in the yogi's journey that happens, especially for those of us in the West who encountered yoga, most of us through asana practice. My teacher, Rima Rabath, once gave a beautiful Dharma talk I live in New York City, I live in Manhattan, and she was talking about how people rush to class in New York City, and probably where you are too, right? Everybody, it's like you rush to class. It's like, oh my God, you're rushing to class, and you show up and you're, okay, now it's yoga time, and you're like, right, okay. Because you see it, like when you see people like, they rush into the room and then they, okay. So, first of all, like the reason they're rushing to the room is because there's something they feel they need or they want. So we have to sort of acquire the attraction to practice. And not every practice is attractive to the same people in every way. There's no one right way to practice yoga, right? But like, so you find a way to your practice, and then you really like, again, if you think about sort of like how we got to here, because like you don't even know why, but you just know that you want it. And so that's what she talked about when she said people just start running to class. But what happens as you start practicing, as you build the practice, is that you start to get really curious about what you're running from.
Well, and I'm going to add something because my daughter's visiting right now, and we went to asana practice yesterday morning. And our family tends to show up when the bell rings. And we needed to drop my grandson off with his dad first. So my daughter looked at me and she goes, "We're 10 minutes early. Should we go get coffee or something?" And I said, "Or we're on time." But that's the funny thing. Like, we had a laugh about it because I feel like when you're rushing to class, which I know there's a lot of spoofs like on Instagram. I've seen the spoofs of people teasing people rushing, because my guess is if you rush to class and you don't take a moment to check within, you're probably rushing through the practice to rush to what's happening next. And the gift is in those moments of going, "We're 10 minutes early." And I'm like, no, I understand that's our family's perspective, but actually we could go sit out our mat, say hi to our neighbor, be prepared for the start of class versus like, sorry, we just had to quickly vacuum the house.
Well, and that time in between is where the chitta is able to settle. I always, whenever somebody comes in and they're late, they will say, "Sorry, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, please do not come into the shala saying you're sorry. Come right in. You are welcome. You are home. Thank you that you're here, that you made the effort. Because, we all go through something in order to get there. And then I will also invite them, they'll come right into the pose, whatever it is. Please take a seat. Take a second, sit on your mat, cross-legged easy seat, whatever it is, and breathe. Just breathe, and come into the breath. I mean, the best way for me to calm the mind, shameless plug for your business, Seth, but one deep breath. Sit down, take a deep breath in, not just a shala, but a deep breath in, and notice how the fluctuation immediately, because it goes into that parasympathetic nervous system. I invite students, I teach hot power yoga. I think most of us do. And, on this podcast. And I will say, please don't go outside. I'm not asking you to stay and sweat and be miserable, but what I'm asking you is to sit on your mat, breathe, calm the mind, because as you get going, sometimes you become overwhelmed by the heat, by the fluctuations, by whatever is being brought up. If you go outside, you're going to talk to the karma, you're going to cool down, you're going to break that cycle that you've so beautifully started. Sit on your mat, take some deep breaths, calm the mind, and when you feel ready, come back into it.
Yeah, keep the container.
Yes.
Right?
And it's your container.
Yeah, and it is, and the mind, like, is a container. And again, this is, I think this definition of yoga is telling us to, like, or it's the invitation is like to work with, as opposed to, and that it's not clear your mind, have no thoughts, and it's not like a specific thought. It's restrain the swirl of your thoughts, which is that like, it doesn't mean that the storm, the cyclone is going to stop blowing. Just like the nature of the atmosphere is to spin, because the earth is spinning, and gravity and physics. So the nature of your mind, it is the nature of the human mind to think. I haven't figured out how to stop yet. So the question then is, how do we work with that? And so there's this sense of like, you start by running to get to class, and then you get curious about what you're running from. And I think what that starts to open up to is when we get to this sense of living the practice of our yoga versus going to do yoga.
Yes.
Right? Like, so like Sarah Page, like, when or how did that, like, where, was there a moment when that shifted, or is there a moment for you when you realized that, like, yoga wasn't just the thing you were going to go do, but that it was like how you wanted to live your life?
My mantra, if I had anything other than Ishvara Pranidhana, that I would tattoo is, am I who I say I am? And I don't have a definitive moment, but there was a moment where I went, I can't do this. This is not a workout. I can do that at the gym. I can do that. I can go anywhere and do that. Something kept bringing me back to my mat. And it was when I stopped going to the gym, you know, I say this sometimes in class. I'm like, this is a workout, but what brings you to your mat? For me, it was that it brought me some peace. And I remember I had a very definitive moment not long ago, actually, probably a year or two ago, where I said, am I who I say I am? And what I say I am is somebody who lives this practice, breathes this practice, and not just the asana practice, all of it. And so when I realized that I was trying to live the 8 limbs of yoga, which we'll go into, that was my definitive moment. I thought, okay, am I who I say I am? And it changed my entire way of being. And I ask myself that often when I feel like the chitta is coming in and I want to react. Are you who you say you are? That's rambling, but yeah, that's the best I got.
No, it's beautiful. But there's the nirodha, right? When you cultivate that metacognition to say like, okay, something's happening. I see the swirl. Who do I want to be? That's an act of nirodha. Or you can act.
Yes.
Yeah. Sally, how about you? Like, what was that journey like from the mat back out to the rest of your life? Like, was there one moment or was there, something, or when you noticed the shift had happened?
So it's funny. I remember being kept wanting to come back, but I really didn't know why. And then really, I think it was when we started practicing and talking about and sharing these sutras 5 years ago or something during COVID, that I started seeing the bigger possibility of yoga. And now what I see is going to the studio, practicing on my mat at home or on wherever. It's almost a controlled environment to speed up the process of awakening for me, because whether I teach power, whether it's hot and I have to give it up. Like I got to surrender just to stay with the breath and the practice. Or I also teach yin and nidra, whether it is like everything feels so busy because I'm meant to be so still, also have to give it up, And so I kind of see the physical practice is helping me. It speeds up the playing with it in a way that when I'm not on my mat and someone cuts me off on the street, or someone I feel is rude to me, or I'm stuck behind a train trying to get somewhere, I'm stuck behind a train trying to pick up my grandkids from school, which is like, but I can steady. And so that's what I see. The physical practice is like almost a quick, like a cold plunge. How can I control this environment to really meet myself that I can steady me no matter what?
I can certainly there were I've certainly had moments of awareness to awakening. The first time I took, I know the time of the first yoga class I ever took that really changed my life. I know when that class was, January 27th, 2016, 6:30 p.m. at Jivamukti Yoga, New York. And then there's that was just this was way more than I ever thought it was. But then there's about 6 months later, I was in the car with my mom. I was driving her from Chicago to move upstate, and we'd been chanting the Guru mantra in class. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshvara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. There is a Guru of creation, there is a Guru that sustains us, and there is a Guru of transformation. There is a Guru nearby that we see, and a Guru in the infinite beyond. And I humble myself before the teachings of all of my Gurus. Is a quick translation of that mantra. And somehow my ex-husband came up, and it was, I had a traumatic divorce now a good number of years ago. And I remember saying like, I don't know, he's a guru. Like, and it really started to shift like, as in a remover of darkness in the most literal sense. Like, he's a teacher. I learned so much. Wasn't fun. Not how I wanted to learn those lessons. I don't recommend it. But if you got to do it, and we all have to do it, every one of us has adversity. We all suffer because we do. Like, it's just the nature of the material realm. Is there a way to be with it? And I said to my mom, like, I just don't like want to hold it that way. I want to hold it as something to learn from. And I really even remember thinking to myself, like, wait a minute, like that's the stuff we were chanting in class. And now all of a sudden I see it starting to connect to something totally unrelated to what I thought was yoga. And it was this like, oh, what if everything is yoga? And it started to really like, to use another mantra, Om Mani Padme Om, the jewel is in the lotus. That like first of all, the lotus has to grow out of the mud. That's Thich Nhat Hanh, no mud, no lotus, right? So there's no lotus without the mud. It only grows out of that darkness. And then once it opens on its own time, each one individually, just the way each one of us comes to awakening in our own process of awakening through a deeply personal experience, an embodied experience, can we start to see that like when the petals open, like it's that there's the jewel of practice within. In that same sense of that Nirodha is not the cessation of the storm. It's stepping through the storm into the center, into the eye where there is stillness. And then we can observe the storm swirling around us without being part of the storm or being carried away and swept up in the storm.
I love this because for me, this is meditation. I teach a mantra and meditation class. This is meditation, sitting with. And it's, there's a misconception, and this is chitta vritti, number one thing I hear all the time is I can't meditate because my mind just keeps moving. I can't meditate.
My mind just keeps, I can't meditate.
Won't.
I hear this in Manhattan, you don't think I've ever heard anybody tell me like,
I can't meditate.
I can't meditate.
Always. And I say, always in class, I don't say this particular, I'll say it here, dear listeners. But if you have a cessation of the mind where your mind is not moving and you have no thoughts, you're dead. The minute you are born, your mind starts to develop. It starts to move. You come out and you're like, what the hell is this? And you start crying. Your mind is already moving, right? So if it stops, and sometimes I'll say, well, good, because that means you're alive. It's a working with, it's an observation. It's a mirror to what, and I often say too, if something keeps coming up over and over, because I lived this, keeps coming up, it keeps coming up, it keeps coming up. That's your lesson. That's your lesson. Look at it. Don't be afraid of it.
Phone's ringing.
Listen to it. If you see it, it might come up in a different way. And you're like, well, why am I thinking about, okay, for me, usually it's my mother. My mother is 93. She's in the throes of dementia a little bit. I forgot to, and that's the first thing that'll start. Or my daughter who lives upstate New York, who has Down syndrome. It's never the first thing. There's something deeper into it. And that's where the meditation, that's where the sight comes in. It's like, okay, why am I thinking about my mother? Oh, did you call her yesterday? Okay. All right. I forgot to call my mother. I need to call mama. All right, I'll do that. But now I'm going to put that aside and breathe and come back in. And that's the second step. Oh, okay. I see you.
That's the practice.
Yeah.
That's the practice.
Yeah.
Okay. Didn't call my mom yesterday.
Thank you, universe.
And it's thank you for the awareness. It's not time to call my mom now. I committed to meditating now. It's time to meditate now.
I'm going to put you over here.
The practice is in the return.
The repair. And I absolutely, that's why 10 minutes, 5 minutes to sit down. I mean, I am stunned that people come to the mantra and meditation class at 8:15 on a Friday night in the middle of New Jersey when people partying. But they do, and they keep coming. And it's because I think that as a country, as a world, we crave stillness.
Whew. Okay, so as we start to wrap up, we're going to start with some inquiry for the week. At the end of every episode, we're going to offer just something for you to chew on. If you want to journal on it, there's no assignment. There's no homework. You will not be graded on this. It's just an invitation for your continued contemplation. So, Sarah Paige, is there an inquiry that you want to propose based on Sutra 1.2?
Yeah. Where is your yoga? What is yoga to you? Where is your yoga? Outside of the asana, where is your yoga?
What about you, Sally?
Got a couple. Am I present in my life? Where am I confusing my stories from the facts of the moment? Are my stories getting in the way of me showing up fully in my life? And am I moving toward a heart-centered life?
Yeah, I think my inquiry is really to just be curious and pick up the phone. And it doesn't mean that you have to believe that the thoughts are true, but can I, instead of disregarding, instead of trying to make them wrong, what if I have no wrong thoughts? They're just opportunities for me to really, I'll use Sarah Paige's inquiry to ask myself, am I who I say I am? Am I who I say I am? And how, and what's the next best choice I can make to be a better expression of who I say I am, or who I aspire to be as a living practice? And then we also are going to offer a teaching tip. So each of us teaches yoga. We probably suspect there's a yoga teacher or two out there listening. And as Sally said in one of our earlier episodes, and I quote all the time, the best teacher is already on your mat. So whether or not you are an RYT gazillion certified instructor, or you are just listening to this because you're interested in learning more about yoga and you're of a practitioner, or you've never stepped on a yoga mat at all, you're a teacher. You can be your own teacher. And so these teaching tips are for everyone. Sarah Paige, what's a teaching tip from you this week?
Start in meditation. Start in a cross-legged, start in meditation. Sit down. A lot of people, especially we teach power, love to start either in down dog or child's pose. Child's pose, everybody shuts their eyes and kind of disconnects. It's because they're in this, that's what I've noticed.
It's a little dissociative. Yeah, I know what you mean.
And it doesn't calm the mind. I don't find that it calms the mind in my body. What it does is it makes me go, okay, now we're going to come into down dog, and now we're going to go into warrior 1s and 2s and blah, blah, blah. Start a meditation with breath. Start with the Ujjayi. Get everybody in Yuj, in community. Start with meditation. A minute. Takes a minute.
What about you, Sally?
I'm going to say the invitation would be to practice letting go through the practice, letting go of recognizing what you cannot control and choose to move from within, allowing your heart to lead. If thoughts become harsh, run them through your heart. If you catch yourself distracted, just maybe a high five for yourself. That catch of distraction is actually the access to awareness. So a little high five moment and then come right back.
Yeah.
It's a practice, people.
Light touch,
it's a practice.
Right?
Practice your
light
practice.
touch. Oh, cool. I just took a trip to Tokyo. Great. Now I can come back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I love that, Sally, because we just beat ourselves up. No self-beat.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think for a teaching tip this week, I sort of want to invite students to really honor the commitment they made to coming to class and put that into embodied practice in Ujjayi and Drishti. Drishti is gaze. You actually can control those things. Right, your breath, and we talk about breath a lot, and we'll talk about breath a lot. Part of the reason, not to be all overly scientific, but it's an autonomic process of the body, meaning it's automatic. We've been breathing this whole podcast. You've been breathing this whole time you're listening, and you're not conscientiously thinking every time, oh wait, now I need to breathe in, and then I need to let it go, and so it's an autonomic process like your heartbeat. But what's also kind of amazing is that we can bring it into conscious control. So there's something incredibly empowering that arises, an incredible sense of empowerment that arises when we bring our breath into conscious control. And that, like, you can choose where to place your gaze, your eyes, your drishti. So the way that might show up in a class environment is like, all right, everybody, you chose, like, hey, New Yorkers, in my world, like, there's a lot of places you could be, there's a lot of things you could do, and you made a choice to come to yoga. So you did and you've done the hardest part. And now I'm going to make a bold request of you, which is I want your full and complete focused attention. And you can do something about it by putting your eyes to one spot, hearing and feeling the sound of your ujjayi breath. And then when you notice, because that's nirodha, right? I'm just looking at one thing. I can feel, right? So that's getting it out of the idea and into the body. And when you notice that you shift, because you will, not holding on to it and not telling yourself you're bad, wrong, fat, stupid, or lazy, acknowledging that the awareness and the return is the practice. And every time is the high five. And that over time, the cycle that, right, can shorten. On a good day, with practice, and in community.
On Sarah Page's inquiry, I just thought of it in a different way because I love that. Like, am I who I say I am? And then it's like, oh crap, I am who I say I am. So back to, am I who I say I am? You know what I mean? Like that, yes. I think is I just totally got
that's
that.
Like the infinite loop. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so good. What a beautiful note. That's a beautiful note to end on.
I'm gonna get that tattooed.
One of the reasons, right?
Well, I was gonna say a bad word, but I decided to.
Well, it's just so funny. Like part of that practice, by the way, is cultivating people who call in who you say you want to be. And as I sit here in this moment right now, like, wow, I just want to thank you both for really reminding me of who I say I am, for being in satsang and community, to aspire together, to live and breathe this amazing, incredible practice of yoga that we are so lucky that we have been exposed to, and that we get the time and space to study together, that we make the time and space to study together. And we are just, for every single one of you, 5,000, 5 million, however many are out there listening to us, thank you so much for your time and for your attention. If you derived benefit from this, please consider sharing it with someone you know or love. Please consider subscribing. We'd love to see you on the regular. If you could rate and review the podcast, that's super useful for discoverability to others. And we are, and we're calling it. There it is. Thank you, Sarah Page. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, listeners. And we will be with you again on the Sutra Squad next week. Bye for now.
Bye,
Thank you.